Welcome to the WoW, Wings of Wisdom podcast, where curiosity meets inspiration, brought to you by the Writing and Communication Center at Ashland University. In each episode, we invite a remarkable guest from our university community to share their journey, explore the power of communication, and unveil the strategies they use to guide students toward growth and success. Whether you're a learner, an educator, or someone captivated by the stories of triumph and discovery in the academic world, you're in the right place. So settle in, open your mind, and prepare to soar on the wings of wisdom.
Welcome to our Writing and Communication Center podcast. Thank you for watching our interview with our very esteemed guest, Profesora Diana Cortes-Evans, who teaches Spanish here at Ashland University. We're very happy to have her with us today. And can you just talk a little bit about yourself to begin?
Okay, hello everybody. I would like to thank Dr. Andrew Rogel and Director of Writing Center, Musin Benson, for this kind invitation to join you on this podcast. Well, my name is, as Andrew introduced me already, my name is Diana Cortes-Evans. I'm originally from Colombia, and I was hired last year as the assistant professor of Spanish in Ashland University. So that's my reason why I moved to Ashland. My degree is from SUNY at Buffalo. I do have a bachelor's in English education back home. So that's my little introduction.
Can you say what your specialization is when you got your doctorate? Because you have a doctorate degree, so which is less than 1% of the whole population of the world. So that's something that you can brag about. Yeah.
So my doctorate was a Ph.D. in Spanish language and literature. My emphasis was Latin American literature, and my dissertation was about political martyrdom. So I was curious to understand the violence phenomenon in Colombia, portrayed through literature. So I picked 4 novels that dealt with this issue. So I concentrated my topic from the second part of the 20th century. And then I found many connections between political martyrdom, religion, social movements, and things like that. Like at the end, I found out in my conclusions that these figures became narrations, ways to narrate the nation through the literature. And then like many marginalized stories were attached to the bodies of these particular figures I had chosen.
Mm-hmm. So I really think that's so interesting, because what you're saying, well, it's so in part because you did say a lot. You could learn so much about somebody's culture through their literature. Can you share a little bit about? So I don't know Colombia. I don't know how many of our students know Colombia. Can you tell us a little bit about your patria, your home country?
Colombia is a very interesting place. It has a very old history. Like my city was founded in the 1500s. So that's a little older compared to, when the Pilgrims arrived to the United States. Mm-hmm. And it has always been a land in conflict. So the violence in Colombia is really difficult to study. And my focus on the 20th century, I was born in 1989. 1989 was one of the most violent years in the 20th century. It was, drug dealing, terrorism. Pablo Escobar was doing so many things there. But so many things played a role to understand violence in 20th century. So the Civil War started out because the main 2 political parties didn't get along. It was liberales against conservadores, and it was mainly they couldn't agree on their stance on the place of religion into politics. So that was mainly what, at the beginning of the century, we started, it was called La Guerra de los Mil Días.
The War of 1,000 Days. Yeah.
Right. And then things just started getting worse and worse and worse. My political figure in my dissertation, he happened to be a candidate, a presidential candidate in 1948, and he got killed in the city. He was going to be the president, and then a revolt happened throughout the whole country. Many people think, many academics and historians identify that magnicide as a rupture, because then violence got much worse.
Right.
So the two political parties were hating each other, but then this man dies and everything just got out of hand. I think a couple of years later after he was killed, his name was Jorge Eliezer Gaitan, and this is a special thing to me because my grandparents were young at the moment and they recalled all of these events. So I grew up listening to these stories of the revolts that happened. Then 2 years later, a dictatorship raised because just things were just very unstable, unsafe. In the 60s is where the guerrillas formed in Colombia. So this all has to do with internal conflicts plus foreign ideas such as communism. Then we have the revolution in Cuba that really inspired the guerrilla movement throughout Latin America, not only Colombia, but other countries as well. So I was born, during these years where guerrillas were established, but then the beginning of the 1970s, there was just this explosion for cocaine production. So then we already had this internal conflict between guerrillas when the drug dealing issue just exploded and just made things worse.
It was Cali and Medellin, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, the
dueling
issue,
cities.
nationwide, but the two cartels, the biggest two cartels in the 90s were Cartel de Medellin and Cartel de Cali. But then I go back in time. The first time I left my country, I was 21 years old. And then, you have people joking about Colombia. And the first thing they would ask me was about cocaine. And so I was really surprised that, people relate that to Colombia, that connection. And Colombians feel like, we should also be recognized for our, richness in culture, biodiversity, people's resiliency. The government recently signed the peace treaty with FARC in 2016. So it's.
And they offered to disarm then? Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, things are still complicated, but they're a little better than 20 years ago.
Right, and in Colombia is just a beautiful country to visit, and you talked about the biodiversity. I mean, you have rainforest there. You have major cities, like you could be walking in Bogota and you'll think you're in Chicago or New York. It's just a big city with a lot of life to it, great food, very, very kind, friendly people, and just a lot of vibrancy and a lot of life. But like the United States, then you could go to another part and it looks like you're in a different world because you're in the jungle,
That's true. Colombia has all kinds of weather. So my city, for instance, is located in the middle of the country, and the altitude is, I think, it's over 8,000 feet above sea level.
So a mile and a half about. Yeah.
Right. So you have all climates. You have snow-covered mountains. You have the Amazons, the two oceans. We have the Caribbean, but also the Pacific. Well, we have another little jungle south of Panama.
Mhm.
That region is called Choco, and it's a very important region because it's the most the place that rains the most
In the world? Or in
in
your country?
Colombia.
Okay.
But like we get
Okay.
a lot of water from that ecosystem.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a very beautiful country, and it's worthwhile visiting, and it has gotten safer, thankfully.
Yeah, and just to go, I mean, as a culinary person, I want to go for the food because you guys just have so many beautiful plates, the meals that you're famous for, and so many special dishes that, I mean, you can't replicate it here. It's very difficult with the ingredients and everything else. So just like a very rich history all around, whether it's political, cultural, in every way. Colombia is just like an amazing country to be from, and to just be proud to be from. When you were talking about some of your studies, you talked about 4 novels. Do you have, what kind of stuff do you like to read for fun? I know you don't have a lot of time. As professors, we have to grade a lot. We have to do planning and everything. Do you get to read anything for fun?
Not
Or have a favorite author?
A favorite author
or poet?
that is a hard question to answer because many come to mind. But I like Octavio Paz. He used to be a Mexican writer and poet. And my favorite work of his is El laberinto de la soledad. Like
So
solitude, labyrinth.
The labyrinth of solitude, yeah.
And these are a group of essays that he wrote to understand Mexican identity, but like me being Latin American, I can relate so much to that. And he does an interesting reflection because he thinks of the Mexican, the Chicanos, which are the people who are born in the United States from Mexican parents. So he thinks from their perspective as well, because they have a mixed, like a sort of like a hybrid identity. And then, you know, he also goes back in time before, you know, pre-Columbian cultures in Mexico, and he does a very interesting thing, understanding festivals and just, you know, the place of Mexicans in the world. But like again, that word is so universal that many people could.
Yeah, it's been translated in countless languages, and one of the greatest things about that work in particular is how he talks about identity. And he was seen in Mexico as they called him Visigodo, like a Visigod, because he was blonde hair, blue eyed. So he didn't necessarily felt like he always fit in Mexico, but when he came to the United States then he started talking, he felt like he didn't fit in there. So he had to deal with that juxtaposition of identity and find acceptance and find his true self, right?
Right.
And that's something that everyone could relate to, from especially someone who moves to a different country and lives and starts a new life, and all that entails.
Yeah.
So his story is a great one, just like something that I think we could all relate to. Just finding your identity. Yeah. So you would say he's your favorite author?
No.
Oh, no.
No, I don't have a favorite author. Like I just, whenever I feel connected with a novel or a movie or anything like that, it's because the theme talks to me. For example, if you ask me what was the first novel I loved, I will have to say Gulliver's Travels.
Wow. Okay.
I read it in Spanish. I believe I was in either 7th or 8th grade. So I just love that satire and you know, any issue that makes me wonder about, you know, our complexities as human beings and our, you know, politics and nature, and just I am drawn to that. Maybe because I'm Colombian and I grew up in a
Yeah.
in a difficult country regarding safety and other issues, but that's what I appreciate from art.
No, that's very interesting. Can you talk a little bit about how have your experiences been at Ashland since you've gotten here? You've been here over a year now?
Yes.
Can you say some things that you really enjoyed, and some things you had to adapt to?
Well, I had to say I knew very little about Ohio before. I've lived most of my time in the United States in New York. I believe I came once to Columbus briefly for a conference, but didn't get the chance to see really anything. So the first thing that I found really interesting was the Amish population, because that was something I wasn't exposed to before. So then I was a little interested in learning a little bit about that community. And of course, like learning, from the meaning of Ohio, which I didn't know it's a Seneca word.
I didn't know that either.
Means, I looked it up when I moved here. It means like Great River or something
Okay.
like that in the Seneca language.
That's cool.
That was cool because I thought Ohio had like an English,
Yeah.
root or anything. So that was nice. That reminds you where you are. And it is a very peaceful place to live. I'm from the capital in Colombia. It's a pretty big city, chaotic traffic. And then in New York, I used to live in the suburbs. So I appreciate the peaceful here, like
the quiet a little bit.
The quiet is clean. Maybe I struggled a little bit with, let's say, like, I really like ethnic restaurants. We do have a couple in town.
But not so many options.
Yeah, so when it comes to do something on the weekends, it's difficult. But I have been enjoying Grandpa's Cheese Barn and the farmers market, which is pretty small, but so there's these little things that have made my experience.
Do you have a favorite American meal that has really grown on you, that if you just could go to any restaurant and say, I don't even want to look at a menu, just make me this?
American?
Yeah. For me, it's like I like pasta. So I mean, I know it's Italian, but like I love like what plate I would pick. Like I would pick a pasta plate.
Well, this is interesting too, because I think I got to try so many ethnic dishes here. When I left Colombia, we didn't have as much. Now it's changing, but I want to say, thanks to being here, I got to enjoy Indian meals, Thai. I would say those two are my favorite, or even just falafel. But American, well, I will have to say Thanksgiving dinner. Like
you like turkey?
That's very different.
Yeah.
I don't think we have, I have ever seen complete turkey in Colombia served at the table. So that's really special.
Okay, that's funny. Yeah. I actually do a deconstructed turkey, so maybe some Thanksgiving you have to come over and see how I take it all apart and kind of put it back together on the big tray. What are your favorite classes to teach?
I always like to teach the most basic course, because I think students are very like little kids, like they are expectant to be surprised, and oftentimes they don't know what to expect. So I like to see those faces, like when they understand something, they get so excited, and you can see their face. And of course, my literature courses, which would be the most advanced ones. Like, and that because students always surprise me with their answers, or, they comment on something, or they understood a word in maybe in a way that I hadn't thought before, or that just complement my opinion on that specific word. So I feel like I learn from my students sometimes.
So as a professor, you can still learn from your students.
Of course.
Mhm.
Yeah, anytime they have to do a project, you know, the Hispanic community in the US is pretty broad.
Mhm.
And yeah, like I love when I learn from my students, or they see a movie that I hadn't seen, maybe in Spanish, and I see it, and then I think to myself, oh, I see what they valued on this, or yeah.
It's so funny that you say that because we're the exact opposite then, because whenever I taught my 101 Spanish classes, all I saw was fear for the first month from my students, because I like to teach the upper level ones better than the lower level ones. I like to teach the literature and dive into the politics or the film or the lit, all that little heavier stuff. But you said you like to just see that when they're just starting, and maybe because you see them develop a love for the language, then they could hear like the music in it.
I believe that course particularly can make a student fall in love with the language.
Yeah.
I believe so, and it has happened.
Yeah, and when they get that confidence, then that they feel comfortable speaking it more, and they really try to put themselves out there. That is a very fun aspect of the learning process.
And students need to believe I can do this, because oftentimes it's just their like grammar Spanish is complicated, or they feel like maybe my pronunciation is not the best, but it doesn't matter. Like you can do it.
No, that's very supportive. And continuing with the talk about education, you had to go through and get your bachelor's, and then did you get your master's, or did you go right to the doctoral?
So I did both.
Like the combination?
Yeah.
We had that at Michigan State, yeah.
I did master's, but I knew I was going to continue for my PhD.
So what I'm trying to say is you have a lot of experience as a student and now a lot of experience with teaching. What kind of advice would you have for students, both as a professor, telling them how they could be successful, and saying what's the things you learned as a student that helped you get through all that, because long, arduous education to get your PhD?
Well, I would say that, like undergrad years, when you are an undergrad, is your time to explore your material. You will discover what you're made of, and you might find passions you didn't know you have. So that is, you only live that once, so enjoy your time here at Ashland. And then, well, my experience, I finished my bachelor's, and then I worked for a few years, and then I went back to school. When I did my graduate, it was very challenging. So yeah, like there were times that, I had to sacrifice weekends and family events and things like that. You think that you won't be able to, or, sometimes it's overwhelming. But at the end of the day, I think that dedication pays off, and you develop, like, what you learn as an undergrad just gets a little more, you become more like a perfectionist, or you get to study something deeper.
When you're talking about that time and the sacrifice, how many pages do you think we read a week when we were getting our doctorate? Do you think we read a week with all the readings in our classes? Do you think I would ballpark it around 600 to 1,000 pages we were reading a week?
I don't remember how many pages, and I am a slow reader in both languages. Like I just take my time, but it was many hours.
Yeah,
it was just, like maybe I could take a short break to have dinner with friends or something like that. But during the semester, it was a
lot of
course
study.
load. Yeah.
And then when you were getting your doctorate, did you teach at the same time too, or were you just doing your studies?
Sometimes I taught 2 courses because the university would ask me. So yeah, I taught.
Yeah, so you not only had your like full-time job, but you're also getting your degree and doing all the responsibilities with that. So you really learned about time management and just how to stay focused and committed. And that's, I mean, that's really the only way that you could get through something like that, I think.
Yeah.
Because it does take a lot of rigor.
Yes.
But the result is you get to go and teach and you enjoy it and you get the interactions with the students and your colleagues and
Right.
go to conferences and exchange ideas and continue learning, like you said, even from the students and from your friends and from people that you
Right.
just get to meet because of they share academic interests. Awesome, yeah. So you well, how do you think you could talk to somebody about fostering that love of learning for their life? Like, how do you inspire, so how can we inspire people to have that desire to keep learning?
Well, in my case, I always thought, oh, how ignorant I am on this topic, So that, that should be always a motivation to improve yourself in all aspects of life. It's not about bragging how much you know, or, like, I know more than you. It's not about that, but, how this knowledge can make you a better person, a more empathetical person. And, just our world needs, yeah, like our world needs
Better global
thinkers.
citizens.
Thinkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People who will be more part of the solution instead
Right.
of the other way. No, I really like that. Can you speak a little bit about the benefit of being able to speak different languages?
Yeah. I regret myself. I don't speak a third language.
Most people don't speak two.
Right. Most people don't speak two. So I think it brings so many benefits to the brain, to the cognition. I think it delays dementia. Well, and the brain is the neuroplasticity, and languages show that learning a language just help you in so many ways to draw connections, to have memory.
So not
improve
just
your memory.
communication.
Yeah,
Right?
so there are scientific benefits of learning a language. Now, to the applicability of communicating with real people, it just changes your life. It can track a new path that you didn't expect. I don't think, me being young, I don't think I ever thought I was gonna end up living in America. And then you have the opportunity to connect with people, lifelong friends, and just your whole life changes if you incorporate this language to all aspects of your life.
How do you see the role of Spanish in the United States? Do you think it's growing? Do you think it's getting better?
I think, well, that's a hard question to answer, because in New York I had a different experience than Ohio. So what I have recently found is that Ohio is one of the states with the lowest percentage of bilingual speakers between Spanish and English. But if you go to California, New York, even Florida, then you would see the other side of the coin.
Chicago, yeah.
Chicago,
yeah.
Even Cleveland and Columbus. Like, I go and I hear Spanish whenever I go. And yeah, it's hard to say. I think the statistics say by 2050 the Spanish speakers populations are gonna grow, but at the same time, like, third and fourth generations of Hispanic families living here, those generations are forgetting Spanish, or they're not, like, their first language is English. So that I don't know about that.
what do you think we could do to make things better? How do you think we could improve that?
I think that the education system, institutions, beginning from, pre-K up to higher ed, they need to see the value of languages, and not only Spanish, but other languages, any language, and like show the benefits of it. And when someone speaks another language, it shows appreciation for the culture. It can close bridges of communication and ideologies. So you have to give yourself a chance to learn about that culture and maybe understand it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think that from the time that children go to school, they should be exposed to different languages, and it should be a requirement all the way up to they graduate to college, because like you said, it's that cultural exchange, it's that brain development that prevents things, like you said, like dementia, like Alzheimer's, like that, the neuroplasticity. It's a great aid for people if they know another language, aside from being able to make new friends and learn so much about another part of the world that they could share in that. And also just kindness. I think that Spanish is really wonderful, because we have so many Hispanic people here, and if they're recently arriving, they might need help. So if you have students taking a Spanish class and you see somebody in the store that they can't figure out, they're trying to ask for help but don't know how to, if you take a couple of years of Spanish, maybe you could help them out. And in 2 minutes, it would just take 2 minutes of your time, talk to somebody on their behalf and say, oh, this is what they're looking for. And then you make somebody feel better and you do a good deed, because it's the reality of our life. Language and communication allows us to help people, not just ourselves. Can you, talking about, we talked a little bit about the benefits of languages and everything else. To get on a little lighter note, do you have any like hobbies that you like to do? Any favorite pastimes?
Yeah, I enjoy hiking. So I explore the options the area has. I enjoy movies. Yeah, and that's
what kind of movies do you like?
Again, it depends on the theme, but usually like related to Latin American culture. Like I always try to find something my students can watch, or something I can, maybe write a paper on. Or
so even when you're watching movies for your own fun, you're thinking of your students.
Yes. Yes.
See,
or even series. Yeah. I exercise. Yeah, and I don't have much free time. I love traveling. Yeah, that's another hobby, traveling, and just learning. It's a hobby too.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference? So movies from the Americas, from Colombia, from Mexico, how are they different from the movies that maybe are in Spain?
That's an interesting question. I did study Spain during grad school. And here we offer a class on civilization of Spain. So my students have seen some movies. Yeah, that's a tricky answer to give.
Is it do they speak a little differently? Is the vocabulary a little different?
Yeah, definitely the accents are different.
Even though it's Spanish, it sounds different.
Yeah. And within Latin America, we have so many accents. In Colombia itself, like we have all kinds of accents too. Yeah, so I don't know a straight answer for that.
But it's not unlike the United States then, because you spent time living in New York, and somebody from New York does not sound like the way I talk. Like our accents are different, even though we're in the the same country, and we use different even
Mhm.
vocabulary. And in Spanish, it could even be more complicated, like in Puerto Rico, instead of saying vos, they say wawa, and like, where did that come from, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just really interesting to see, like, even if you speak Spanish, if you study different countries, you'll pick up so much more with your
Mhm.
language learning, just by studying their history and their language,
Mhm.
their particular dialect, yeah.
Well, I guess through movies you can learn about culture, and even though Spain and Latin America speak the same language,
Mhm.
they're different cultures. So of course, like, when I look at movies, I appreciate the architecture, for example.
Mhm.
So Spain is a much older civilization
Mhm.
than the Americas. And then you see that, Latin America, you see the landscape, you see different buildings, you see different weathers, different foods. So those are valid aspects to compare and contrast between movies from Spain versus, movies from Latin America.
Mhm.
And I want to say that Latin American movies revolve, or at least the movies I see, revolve around politics.
Mhm.
I'm thinking of Pedro Almodovar, and I think he does a little more of
Famous Spanish
yeah,
director.
a famous Spanish director. I think he's more interesting in gender
Mhm.
and
And identification.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So you see that we are not in the same
Mhm.
boat,
Right.
let's say.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I think that's very interesting, and I think another point to add on to that is that how you have like directors from Mexico, like Guillermo del Toro, who's pretty famous now here in the United States. But like when you mentioned Pan's Labyrinth, that's a person from another country capturing the Spanish Civil War from an outsider view,
Right.
from an entirely different perspective. So it's just kind of really cool how they could share and add to the conversation.
Yeah, of course they can overlap,
Mhm.
right? Like I've seen, like, especially series lately, Spain has been producing series, for example, on drug dealing, and then
Mhm.
it has connections with, for example, narcos.
Right.
So it's a more like transnational
Mhm.
topic.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of the show that came out. It must have been like 4 years ago though now. It was on drugs in Spain and on the coast.
Mhm.
And it was, just really well shot, really well done, and just very interesting. And a lot of people don't know that. You said in Colombia, people always associate like Chicago. People tell me, like, oh, Al Capone. But in Spain is kind of the gateway to Europe when it comes to having things shipped over like that.
Right.
And a lot of people don't know that.
Mhm.
But when you were talking about Almodovar, one of the best living directors right now, he's like a Scorsese or any of the famous ones. If you had to think of a famous person you'd like to sit down and have a coffee with or have a dinner with, do you have anybody that you could think of that you would just want to spend some time with and get to know, or just get to meet?
Maybe Pope Francis.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think he would be an interesting person to meet, and talk about, like, I think he has been a little more open to previous popes. I'm not Catholic or anything like that, but he's the first Latin American pope.
Where's he from?
Argentina.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So, and it was a very historical change to have a Latin American pope in the history of the Catholic Church. Because typically you'll get them from Europe. But I think that it is wonderful things he's doing, a very interesting person, and it's nice to see that he's recognizing more people's rights and their stances, and just having empathy for everybody.
Yeah.
Just humility, and not being as sometimes it's been in the past. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that would be a fun lunch. You'd have some good wine because you could go to Italy and,
Yeah,
have some nice prosciutto and,
and I'm interested in Argentina too. Like I did study for my dissertation a little bit about Argentina. So it will be fun to discuss some things, from Argentina with him, but also his experience in Italy. And
Mhm.
yeah, he went to Colombia. I forgot when, a few years ago. He was already Pope. And one of my aunts got to see him really close, and she shook his hand.
Mm. Well, that's a
She
wonderful,
was
that's a
very
once in a
proud,
lifetime
and she
experience, yeah.
sent me the picture. So
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your time with us and all of your wonderful insights. I'm so excited about all the things you offer Ashland University as a Spanish teacher with sharing culture, language, and just intercambio. This just the exchanges, that somebody would never get if they didn't have an actual native speaker, somebody from Colombia that has so many rich resources to offer. So thank you so much for participating with our Writing and Communication Center interview, sharing yourself, and thank you for all the wonderful work you do here at the university.
thank
We
you
really
for the
appreciate it.
invitation.